Welcome to Concrete Block, the podcast where we dive into the latest news and current events from around the world. I'm your host, Walter. Today, we're going to explore a complex and multifaceted topic that has been making headlines in recent weeks. The situation involves the European Union, the United States, Israel, and Iran, and it's a story about diplomacy, politics, and the consequences of inaction. According to a former EU representative to the West Bank and Gaza, Sven Kuhn von Bergstorff, the European Union's failure to take a firm stance against Israel's breaches of international law and its reluctance to challenge the United States' foreign policy decisions have contributed to the current state of global instability. Von Bergstorff argues that a more robust and principled response from European leaders could have potentially reshaped incentives in Washington and Tel Aviv, altering the course of events. The story begins with the EU's decision not to impose significant consequences on Israel for its actions in the occupied territories, which von Bergstorff believes emboldened the Israeli government to pursue more aggressive policies. At the same time, European leaders were eager to maintain a positive relationship with the United States, despite concerns about the Trump administration's foreign policy approach. Von Bergstorff suggests that the EU's reluctance to challenge the US was motivated by a desire to avoid confrontation and potential economic repercussions. However, this strategy ultimately backfired, as the US concluded that Europe was willing to compromise on key issues and failed to take a strong stance against Israeli actions. The consequences of this inaction have been far-reaching, with the situation in the Middle East becoming increasingly volatile. The EU's failure to assert its influence has also created an opportunity for other global powers, such as Russia and China, to fill the vacuum and pursue their own interests in the region. As we examine this complex issue, it's essential to consider multiple perspectives and avoid simplistic or biased analysis. The situation is nuanced, and there are no easy solutions. However, by exploring the root causes of the problem and examining the decisions made by key players, we can gain a deeper understanding of the challenges facing the international community. We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Concrete Block. Welcome back to Concrete Block. We're diving into a complex web of international relations and alliances. The European political community recently gathered in Yerevan, Armenia, with nearly 50 leaders in attendance, including Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who was invited as a non-European country representative. This summit comes at a time when the world is witnessing a significant shift in global dynamics, particularly with the United States under President Donald Trump adopting an America First policy that has strained traditional alliances formed post-World War II. Trump's approach has led to broad tariffs on the rest of the world, repeated undercutting of NATO partners, and even threats to seize territories such as Greenland from Denmark. This abrasive stance has prompted global leaders to reassess their relationships with the US. European nations, while still dependent on the US for security, are looking to bolster their defense sectors. According to a Bloomberg intelligence analysis, it may take over a decade for European NATO members to sufficiently strengthen their defense capabilities, potentially requiring an investment increase of $340 billion to $720 billion annually. The critique of Trump's policies isn't limited to European leaders. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has called the Iran war illegal and barred the use of Spain's airspace and U.S. bases on its territory for operations supporting strikes on Iran. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz expressed concerns over the strategic exit the Americans are choosing in their conflict with Iran, suggesting that the U.S. is being humiliated by Iranian leaders. In response to European criticism and perceived lack of support, especially in the war with Iran, and reopening the Strait of Hormuz, Trump has vowed to cut thousands of U.S. troops stationed in Germany and raise tariffs on cars and trucks from the EU to 25%. This escalation highlights the tension within alliances that have been cornerstone of global stability for decades. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer acknowledged this strain, stating, "We cannot deny that some of the alliances that we've come to rely on are not in the place we want them to be. There is more tension in the alliances than there should be. It's very important that we face up to this as a group of countries together. French President Emmanuel Macron also emphasized the need for Europe to take greater control over its defense, citing the cost of dependency on the American umbrella. As global leaders navigate these challenging times, they're exploring new partnerships beyond traditional areas like food, energy, and defense into spaces such as space-based communications, semiconductors, and critical minerals. The strategic imperative is clear: to build sovereign capabilities with trusted partners, moving beyond nostalgia and towards a future where alliances are not merely reactive but proactive in shaping global security and prosperity. Welcome back to Concrete Block. Today, we're going to dive into a thought-provoking topic that has been making waves in the world of international relations. The concept of soft power has been a cornerstone of diplomatic efforts for decades, but it seems that its importance has been lost on some of the current leaders in the United States. Soft power refers to the ability of a country to influence others through attraction rather than coercion. This can be achieved through various means, such as culture, education, diplomacy, and foreign aid. The idea is that by promoting positive values and relationships, a country can build trust and cooperation with other nations, ultimately achieving its goals without resorting to military force or economic sanctions. However, according to a recent article by Stephen Walt, the current administration in the U.S. seems to be neglecting the importance of soft power. Instead, they are relying heavily on hard power, which is based on military strength and economic coercion. This approach has been criticized for being short-sighted and potentially damaging to the country's long-term interests. Walt argues that the U.S. has a rich history of successful diplomatic efforts that were built on soft power. Examples include the Marshall Plan, NATO, and the Civil Rights Movement, which all contributed to the country's positive image abroad and helped to build strong relationships with other nations. On the other hand, the over-reliance on hard power has led to some of the biggest foreign policy failures in U.S. history, such as the wars in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. It's worth noting that the current administration's approach to international relations is not entirely without its supporters. Some argue that a strong military and a willingness to use it are necessary for maintaining national security and protecting American interests abroad. However, others counter that this approach is not only costly but also ineffective in achieving long-term goals. As we consider the role of soft power in international relations, it's essential to remember that diplomacy is a complex and multifaceted process. While hard power has its place, it's crucial to balance it with softer approaches that prioritize building relationships, promoting cultural exchange, and supporting economic development. In conclusion, the debate around soft power highlights the challenges of navigating complex global relationships in the 21st century. As the U.S. continues to evolve its approach to international relations, it's essential to consider the potential benefits and drawbacks of different strategies. By engaging in thoughtful discussion and analysis, we can work towards a more nuanced understanding of the role of soft power in shaping a more peaceful and prosperous world. That's all for today's Concrete Block. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, stay informed.